Hi, I'm Murray Bernard, writer, architect, and contributor to Alcon Lighting's Insights and Language of Lighting. In this conversation, I'm joined by Lisa J. Reed, principal at Reed Burkett Lighting Design in St. Louis and a respected voice in the architectural lighting community. Lisa's work balances technical rigor with a strong focus on human experience and visual storytelling. Beyond her design practice, she has been an active leader in women in lighting and design, helping to broaden the conversation around the future of the profession. We'll discuss her approach to lighting design, the challenges of integrating lighting with architecture, and how emerging technologies are shaping the industry. Lisa, thank you for taking the time to join me. I'm excited to learn more about your background and perspective, so let's dive right in. So I'm really interested to hear about your background because, you're not the typical lighting designer. You're an electrical engineer and you've also worked in lighting sales and lighting design. So there's a lot of different interesting overlapping experiences you have going on here. So I'm sure you're going to have a really valuable perspective to share with our audience. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So to get started, I'm curious, how do you approach lighting at the beginning of a project? Like, what are you looking for before you even start considering the fixtures?
I think it's really important to start with a lot of questions and to start with listening. And I'm just very collaborative by nature. That's how I design, anyhow.
Okay.
So I don't come in with a lot of preconceived ideas. Mm. um, so I like to begin by asking questions and trying to get at the heart of the goals of the client. And sometimes that involves getting them out of their preconceived notions too, and getting them to just let's step back and not talk about what picture you want to use, but let's talk about what feeling you want to evoke, what experience you want people to have in this space. And so it's always really fun to start with those kind of big picture questions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely always a collaborative process, and you don't really know what the client needs until you ask. So I think that's a fabulous answer. That's exactly where a good designer should start for sure.
That's the part of the process
Yes.
that I love, really start to finish. And if people
Yeah.
dig in and ask me what it is I like about lighting design, it is the people. And so getting to start at the beginning and really getting to know the people and how they're going to use the space or how they're going to
Exactly.
activate it, like that's the fun part.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit of playing psychologist, I think, to some
It
degree.
is.
So, building on that, like what's one coordination challenge that you run into repeatedly when you're integrating lighting with architecture?
Mm. My brain is going in about 5 different directions.
Yeah, that's a pretty
What?
loaded question.
Well, one thing is that you can't over communicate, and I think especially with young designers, they get nervous about putting too many notes on a plan, or now that everything is BIM and 3D modeled,
Mhm.
they don't put notes because well, it's all there, it's all built out.
Another thing that I think about with that kind of coordination, things that pop up, there are certain types of lighting installations that are always problematic. Handrail lights integrated in a handrail where you have multiple disciplines. Really, all of these are places where you have multiple disciplines that have to touch the lighting. So, a pole-based detail for an outdoor lighting pole, you need somebody who's structural to design that pole base, and then you have electrical supplying the pole and the light fixture. Um, Catenary lighting is another big one where you've got to get some structural engineering involved with getting those loads calculated. And so
Yeah.
those are some of the things where we have a list of those sort of trigger points, those really tricky details that we need to make sure that we over communicate. on.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a good point. There's a lot of coordination involved and, so many parties involved in each project. So that's always a real challenge. Um,
I there's a presentation I give kind of sort of titled "Should You Tell Your Lighting Designer?" And we have a photograph. We have a photograph in there of some millwork in like a, I think like a coffee shop, and there's a menu board and then shelves on each side. And there's a light fixture just about 6 inches off center for the shelves, and just a round recessed downlight. And what happened is they adjusted the size of that millwork. I think they made the signboard shorter, and suddenly that light was no longer centered on the shelves, even though, they installed the light per plans, but not centered on the shelves. And nobody told the lighting designer that the millwork size changed, because why would you? How would that be impacted
right.
by or impact lighting? So
But it does. It really
yeah,
makes the difference. Yeah,
everything does.
it does. It's all connected. So here's a interesting question. So when you're designing a space, how do you design what not to light?
Oh, I love that question. I really love that question because some people don't even think to ask it. And by
Yeah,
thinking
it's
about what
you light and like, how much, like, oh, do we have enough light? But like sometimes restraint is the answer.
it really is. I started my career as an electrical engineer, even though my passion was lighting and lighting design. But what I learned and kind of how I was trained as an electrical engineer was to calculate and put foot candles on the task. And we
Good
were
stuff.
very focused on lighting the desk, lighting the table,
Mhm.
maybe lighting the floor. And when I shifted and went to work for a lighting designer, it was like I raised my head up from the task and I started
Yeah.
looking around the room. And when you look around the room at like what is in your visual field in this space, is it the ceiling? Is it the walls? And when you start lighting the important elements, the important parts of your visual field, then you just leave the rest dark. And I think that's the key is narrowing it down. You
Yeah,
can't have all of the flavors of ice cream, so pick
exactly.
the important parts. Pick the important parts and then do have the restraint to leave the rest dark. I I was fortunate enough last year, early 25, to get to go to a conference in the Middle East in Dubai, and that's a place where the lighting designers there are talking a whole lot more about restraint and using
Really?
restraint than we talk about here, because here so often it's about value engineering and everything's getting cut
Mhm.
and you're just trying to keep something cool in the project.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot of competition to have the flashiest, most impressive building and the most impressive lighting system.
Mhm.
And so the designers there get to work and think and talk a lot more about, hey,
Hmm.
let's use a little restraint. Let's stand out by not lighting every surface. And so
Right.
that's what
Yeah.
your question made me think about.
Oh, that's interesting to hear. Yeah, it's almost like in artwork when the white space is almost as important as, the color or, the other occupied space. It's like reading the negatives, I think is essential.
I'm the daughter of an artist, art teacher. And I love it when we get to illuminate art and see art. And so I love it that you're thinking about it in terms of an artist perspective, because that's really what it feels like to us. Like lighting
Yeah.
design is painting with light.
It is painting with light. I love that. That's a really beautiful way to put it. So, along those same lines, like how do you think about contrasts and hierarchy in a space, like especially like in commercial environments that tend to default to more uniform lighting?
Well, especially in commercial environments, there's a place for uniform lighting
Mhm.
in certain environments. We like to talk about the contrast of lighting for a McDonald's and lighting for a steakhouse. And you
Mhm.
would not want one is not right and the other wrong, but they're both right for that space. So
Yes.
that's first off to think about, you wouldn't want to light a McDonald's like a steakhouse because that would be a little scary and maybe gross, and you wouldn't be sure about how clean the place is. And conversely, obviously, you would ruin the ambiance if you went the other direction. Um,
Yeah.
but that said, even in say a workplace, there are sometimes there is art to illuminate, and it's nice
Hmm.
to highlight that. There are almost always whiteboards or
Hmm.
or places that you want to make sure that you've covered. Awards walls, kitchens that have, places to tuck lights. I mean, then it's also kind of about layers of light too.
Yeah.
And you have to leave some of it dark for the layers to show. If everything's over illuminated, then adding a layer does nothing for you. So yeah, you have to let some of it get a little more dim than 50-foot candles.
Exactly. Yeah, some contrast is definitely good. You don't want to exhaust the eye, like you don't want to overwhelm people at the same time. So it's a delicate balance. One thing I'm curious about is what's a lighting mistake that you still see in projects today, like even well-designed projects? You get to play critic a little bit.
One that I just see all the time, I'm not sure that I would say this is a well-designed one, but one that it's the first thing I correct. Everyone hears that you're a lighting designer, and then they want to know if you will help them light their kitchen.
No, no.
And and then the plan always has an island and the countertops, and then three downlights in that empty space between the island and the countertops, where
Hmm.
is exactly where you don't need light. That's not a work
Right.
surface. That's just where you're going to stand. And in fact,
Like,
with those downlights there, if you're standing at the counter, now suddenly that's behind your head and
and
you're
you're casting
casting a
shadows.
shadow on
Yeah.
your own work.
Yes,
So
that's a
so
really good.
that is such an easy one, and it happens all the time to just, hey, move those downlights over the edge of that countertop so that you're getting light in front of you when you're working. But then be careful because when you do move them, if you have upper cabinets, then you're likely to get some scalloping on those uppers. So you want to think about again, get your head up, look up from the task and look around and think about the cabinets and align the scallops with the millwork in a way that makes sense. But we've found often when you move those lights out of that walkway where you don't need them
Yeah.
in a kitchen, you can usually take one or two out too, because maybe
Mhm.
there's a hood light or there's some other task light or a refrigerator or something that has its own internal illumination. So I think that's something that's interesting. Good lighting design often ends up in a solution that costs less, not more. I think there's a misconception that lighting designers are going to gold
Yeah.
plate everything and specify expensive fixtures, and we do and we can because we know how amazing those expensive fixtures are,
Mhm.
but we can also design to a budget.
Yeah.
And we can, not throw in wasteful fixtures that aren't needed. I don't know who said it, but maybe it was Mark Twain. Anyway, like it takes more effort to use fewer words, right? And
Yeah.
so it takes it takes more effort
So
to
true.
use fewer fixtures too in lighting design. So it takes more skill or talent to use the right luminaires in the right places and
Mhm.
not just throw a sea of downlights on the plan.
Right. Yes, you're right. Like writing concisely is a lot harder sometimes than being verbose, and the same absolutely applies to lighting design and selecting fixtures. That's a really good point and very poetically put. Can you walk me through a recent project where, lighting obviously, well, lighting plays a critical role in all of your projects, I'm sure, but tell me a little bit about like some of the key decisions you made that shaped the outcome.
Mm. The first project I thought of when you said that, was recently completed, and it's the Campanile at the University of Kansas. It happens to be my alma mater, so it was really exciting to get the opportunity to work on a project where I went to school.
That.
And there were 4 people in our office who graduated from there who all got to touch that project. So that was very special.
Really cool.
And it's a small World War II, I believe, 1 or 2 memorial bell tower on the campus, but it's very prominent. You walk through it, it's got a lot of lore surrounding it. You walk through it on graduation day and not before, or you won't graduate. So you can walk
Okay.
into it and out of it, but not through it before graduating. And you can see it for miles as you're entering town. It's up on a hill and it's this tower. And when I was a student there, and for many years, it had a single enormous high pressure sodium light on each side from the ground, lighting the stone tower. And then it has white fins on top that had some floodlights, probably mercury vapor and maybe eventually metal halide. So it had a cool over warm approach to it. In some of the old pictures, it's sort of warmish on the tower and then greenish on the top. But supposed to be warm and white. And some of the things that happened, this project ended up being phased, and there was a landscape design happening about 3 years ago, and we were brought into the project to take the design to a design development level so that they could put in any conduit and lay things underneath the new landscape and hardscape so that we wouldn't have to interrupt that later. So
Yeah.
that was one of the design challenges for sure, is making decisions now for what happens later. But one of the
Exactly.
things
And
that we'd like to do on any kind of monument like that, we have great modeling and great calculation software that can help us, but nothing beats a hands-on mock-up. And so we went to the site with some sample products and looked at them on the building to make sure, sort of to confirm our design decisions, because once that new hardscape was laid, we weren't going to be able to tear that up.
right. Exactly.
Um, and so I would say one of the more interesting choices that we made were to put the new floodlights for the tower up on poles instead of down on the ground. The old ones had been at grade and hidden with some landscape, some shrubbery, which had completely grown over it. You think about the maintenance over decades.
Yeah.
So none of that light was hitting the tower anymore. And then just thinking about students and keeping people from easily grabbing, touching, shifting, and moving the lights. So we'd set them back, a grouping of 4 floodlights on each corner instead of on each side, to illuminate the tower. And then at the top, our mock-up was really important because we were using a linear light to uplight the fins,
Mhm.
but there's a trap door to give access to the roof, and there was absolutely no way to mount a linear light on one side of one of the fins, but we were able to see through the mock-up that there was enough reflectance with the white surfaces that we could actually light one side, allow reflected light to illuminate the other side. And so we cut our fixture quantity in half,
Wow.
based on our mock-up at the
Great.
top on the fins. So it's very hands-on and iterative. So then that project sat for a while. We started to come back and do the lighting installation, and then they were doing some tuck pointing work on the tower. So then it
Mhm.
sat for a while longer. And so then to come back, it was really gratifying to finally get that finished last month. So
I bet. Well, congratulations. That must have felt really good to not only work on your alma mater, but to see the project come together and get completed and feel like you're still a meaningful part of where you went to school. Now you've touched it in a different way, so that's really special.
right, thank you. It was very gratifying. It was fun, and we were quite proud of it. I didn't say, I laid out at the beginning, that it was very warm and then cool white, and we were able to retain that because it's a memorial. There was a look at, and we even still do have the ability to do color changing lighting on the top at the fins,
Hmm.
but we wanted to be really respectful because it is a memorial and not too flashy. I
Right.
would say that's a common theme back to that restraint
Yes.
question that we were talking about earlier is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And
Very
so
true. That's true for
we
many things in life.
it is. So we retained the warm now LED light, so not quite as warm as the sodium was. But we have a really nice even light on the tower now instead of sort of a blob at the base.
God, I bet that looks beautiful. Very cool. What do you think designers are starting to understand better about lighting, and what do you think still hasn't caught up yet?
Ooh. I do think it feels like lighting is having a moment. I
Hmm.
do think we're starting to hear from other design professionals and from the general public, and maybe through some of the efforts of the IES, really that people do understand that lighting matters, that it impacts the way they feel and experience space. Maybe it's just simply because if you ever go to a big box store and see someone in the the light bulb aisle trying to pick
Yes.
something for their house, and they always look so confused, I
It's
almost always
the
say,
thing.
"Can I help you? Because, yeah, what color is soft white?" And
Right.
sure, daylight sounds good, but you really probably don't want it in
It's
your
a
living
little
room.
harsh. Yeah.
So, to your question though, what is the design community they are starting to understand
Hmm.
how light can really impact us. And I think maybe where we still have some room to learn is what I said earlier about lighting design doesn't necessarily add cost to your project or isn't I hope that we get to the point where lighting design doesn't have to be just for the special project, but that it becomes really an integrated part. It's one of the four visual professions that touch a
Hmm.
project. You've got an architect, you've got an interior designer, and a landscape architect.
Exactly.
All the other disciplines affect how you feel. All the other disciplines, like all the engineering, structural engineering, mechanical engineering. They're important, but the only other one that's super visual is lighting design, and we really
Yeah,
try
very
to
true.
pull the other three together. We're the ones who get our heads up from looking down at our task and really think about integrating all of it. We are thinking about millwork and how, lighting is impacted or impacts the millwork. We are thinking about equipment in a coffee shop. You wouldn't want to, hang the pendants over the coffee machine. You want to hang those over the counter where you're picking up your drink. All of that stuff that we're thinking about all the time is sort of mind-blowing, and it takes a special special person to care about organizing and coordinating all those details, but then also care about the aesthetics and the
Yeah.
artistry of a space and how it looks.
Yeah, absolutely. That leads directly into my next question, actually, which is how do you approach visual storytelling? Like, are there specific spatial or material qualities that you instinctively look to reveal or emphasize through your lighting that help enhance the character or the design of the building?
Well, I love how you asked that because it really is about enhancing the architecture.
Hmm.
So it is looking at what they've done and what have they created in this building or in this space or this sculpture that is special. What
Yeah.
part wants to stand out?
Hmm.
And so, sometimes it's really easy. It's the columns, it's the
Hmm.
gentle molding at the top. It's, and then sometimes it's a little more subtle. I can think of a project on the exterior one time. It was a high-rise multifamily residential tower,
Hmm.
and the the balconies were longer at the top and then they got shorter as you came down the side of the building, and it created this subtle diagonal line on the facade. And by just putting a dot of light at the corner of each of those balconies, um, emphasize that line. So we do try to pick out the sexy parts of the building and light them.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good strategy to me. Now getting into a little more technical side of things, we've touched on that a little bit. But I'm curious, human-centric lighting is really becoming a big thing, and circadian rhythms, and like how does lighting affect our, biology? Has that come into play into any of your work?
It has, it does. We work on some healthcare environments, and we've been really fortunate to work on one that's completely focused on, it's a cancer center, completely focused on avoiding any cancer-causing substances or elements in the building. And so that
Yeah.
includes with lighting, using circadian light to support people's natural
Hmm.
circadian rhythms. I've always also been a little bit cautious with that sort of thing
Hmm.
because we aren't doctors. It's fascinating,
Sure.
and I want to do no harm. But when you start talking about dosing and things, I mean, fortunately now IES has stepped into that space and given us
Yeah.
some recommended practices for that. But um, yeah, I have opinions about circadian lighting, specifically that I don't want to put that kind of thing in an office or into a space where someone's have going to have to leave that space and get in a car and stay alert and drive home. So
Good
a
point.
good place for say circadian lighting is any place where someone is going to stay and sleep.
Hmm.
So it's great for residential and dorms and hotels and hospitals, but I don't necessarily like it personally in an office because, whether or not you ought to be working late is beside the point. If you're there working late, it's because you need to be and want to be alert, and I want the lighting
Exactly.
system to support that. So those are a few of my main thoughts on just using that
Yeah,
the
that's an interesting.
circadian side of it.
Yeah, a lot of people just sort of go along with it like, "Oh, this is a good thing." Because it sounds good, but like when you put it that way, it's true. People are working late for a reason. If they wind down and then get in the car to head home, that's not a safe situation at all.
On the flip side, we live in these indoor spaces and we don't get enough light in the
Yes.
mornings, right? So we could certainly do more to contribute to getting that good vertical foot candles in your eyes in the morning, in the daytime when we're
Yeah.
working.
Yeah, definitely. And daylight's always an underutilized tool that um
Luminaire number 1.
yes, the natural source for sure. Um, so this kind of leads into the next question a little bit, and you already touched on this slightly, talking about some of your previous works. But to what extent are you incorporating color tunable or dynamic lighting systems in your work?
That's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it. It
Mm.
does sometimes require restraint. We design a lot of bridges, and
Okay.
um, those especially, the clients are almost always looking for a lot of flash, a lot of
Yeah.
color, and it becomes almost a game in our company to try to, hey, let's see if we can keep this, maybe a little more sophisticated.
Hmm.
Um, but that said, there are some great places to use color and to use it as an accent and to we just don't I once sat in an airport coffee shop for several hours. I was visiting with a friend. I wasn't traveling, and there was color changing light that was just cycling, and after a little over an hour he and I both said, I got to get out of here, so it was it was set well for the typical person experiencing that space who
Yeah, if
was
you're passing
transient.
through. Yeah.
Right. So I think the same thing kind of can happen with color and tunable light is that it can get overused. But
Yeah.
back to your previous question about human centric, I think something that makes lighting human centric is giving humans control. And
Yeah.
so I think it's okay to say, all right, well, here's your lighting. My very first tunable, golly, it was probably 12 years ago. It was pretty far back that we were working with a high-end residential client. And when we started talking to them about selecting the color temperature for their home, they said, well, we don't want to pick one. And
Mhm.
so we used tunable white light to
Mhm.
allow them to set the lighting for each day based on their mood. And
Yeah.
I just don't think anything can be more human centric than that.
That's very true. And yeah, color makes sense in certain instances, like you said, in a more transient environment, if you're trying to do branding, if you're, maybe even a retail or hospitality setting where you're really trying to build up excitement.
I was just also going to say on black surfaces,
Hmm.
that's something that people don't think about. Oh, we want to uplight this black ceiling. Well, white light just dies on black, but man,
Yeah.
blue or red or amber can really pop and look
Hmm.
amazing. So that's another place I like to use color.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I like that. Very useful tip. Are there any emerging technologies in lighting that are really influencing how you think of design today? Or is there any that you think are more speculative or overhyped? Maybe, color, like dynamic lighting might kind of fall into that, but is there anything else that you're seeing that maybe is not as relevant as it's built up to be?
I would say I am pretty fascinated and impressed by what the color scientists are doing at the chip level to make the color changing light more saturated in each color, and whether that's directing, all of the energy to a single color when you're doing single color light. And there are a lot of different ways that they're doing that. I'm also impressed with how some of them are designing ways that we can extend how far we can go between power drops. That's
Mhm.
something that comes up a lot. That if you're doing long runs on a tall building or a bridge, a long bridge, the less frequently we have to start over with another power run is helpful. There's still room to grow and improve
Mhm.
how we control light, and I am a flicker sensitive person, so
Mhm.
I avoid any driverless LEDs because that tends to flicker. I've seen maybe one or two that I don't perceive, but that doesn't mean someone else doesn't perceive
Right.
it. Um, but using quality drivers to control how people experience flicker is another
Mhm.
thing. And frankly, all of the circadian the work around, the impact of light on health. And
Mhm.
if we can get the right amount of the right spectrum of light to our eyes at the right time of day, I mean, I love that. That is exciting.
Yeah, it definitely is. So to back up a little bit, you did start out in electrical design and then you moved to lighting design. Can you tell me a bit about what inspired you and what led you to follow that path?
Sure. It's such a great question to ask anybody in lighting. How did you find this space? Because the paths are always different. I,
Yeah.
have met people who came to lighting through dance or, but I actually went to school at the University of Kansas for architecture.
Mhm. Oh, you did. Okay.
I did. I went to study architecture, and I had come from a small town, so I'll say that that was why I hadn't heard of architectural engineering or didn't really understand the nuance between the two.
Mhm.
And KU had both programs, and so I got there and I met people who were in architectural engineering and people who were architects and tried to figure out the differences. And after a year or two, I decided that maybe I had selected the wrong major and I changed to architectural engineering. And I started, I thought, "Well, I'm going to study structures. I want to be like Frank Lloyd Wright." And I
Mhm.
took a concrete structures class and wanted to die. It was
Right.
not
It's
at
rough.
all what I wanted to do with my life. This is not it.
Yeah,
But I was really
physics. Uh,
fortunate. Oh, yeah. And it was
brutal.
just also kind of boring. I mean,
Yeah.
hard and boring. Um, so for me. So at that time, Kansas had a really strong set of three really great lighting professors, two in the architectural engineering department and one in the architecture department, and they were all working together to teach lighting. And there was a scholarship, the Beazle Scholarship, that was available to me if I would just take one or two extra lighting classes. So I'm like, sure, I'll take an extra class. And by the second lighting class, I was absolutely hooked. This was it because it was the design that I wanted as an architecture student,
Hmm.
but it was also um, getting to the right answer, doing some calculations and figuring out how to really make things work. It wasn't just pure art and drawing.
Right.
So I absolutely fell in love and really knew that lighting design was what I wanted to do before I graduated. But when I graduated, it was a little bit of a slump in the economy, and I took the only job I could get, which, my colleagues were getting jobs at Banana Republic and The Gap. So I felt
Yeah.
very happy to get a job at um, an MEP engineering firm doing CAD. So I took my
Yeah.
first job as a CAD tech. I went in on the first day, and the newly hired electrical engineer at that firm found out that I had an architectural engineering degree, and he said, "Wait a second, guys, she's not a CAD tech, she's a graduate engineer." And so he
Right.
took me under his wing, and I was also a sassy kid because I asked them who did the lighting design at their firm, and they said, "Well, we just have our reps do that." And I said, "Not anymore, I'm doing it." And
Love it.
so I jumped right in to lighting as much as I could, but without any sort of mentoring at that firm. Or, my mentors were engineers.
Hmm.
So, like I said, I learned to do the calculations and I picked fixtures, and I thought that was my job. And so then, um, 5 years into my career at MEP firms, I got to go to work for a lighting designer and really learned a lot more about experiential lighting design and the space, thinking of things spatially and looking up and taking in the visual, um,
Yeah.
taking in the full visual field and thinking about lighting in that way. So I was really fortunate in that job to get to work a little bit with Leslie Wheel, who was
Okay.
one of the first architectural lighting designers and first woman in our field. And
Very
so,
cool.
yeah, going from there, it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed, I think it was on your LinkedIn that you mentioned that, you look up. I'm a lighting designer. I look up. I
Yeah.
love that saying because as an architect myself, I always have used that statement like, don't forget to look up because I think it's important to stop and see, what's not just what's at ground level and what's happening around you, but how does it resolve itself above you? And I think that's especially with lighting design, a very important point.
Oh, that's really good though. Even in architecture, we look
Mhm.
at plans, which sort of makes your brain want to think about looking down, right?
It
If you're working
does.
in plans. Yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed you've been involved in a lot of different initiatives like Ladies of Lighting and Wild, which I think is awesome that you do mentorship and focus on working mothers in the profession, which is really awesome. Have you seen the industry evolve in terms of who's shaping lighting today and how has that changed?
I think our whole world has evolved. Uh
Mhm.
the day we're recording this happens to be my son's 25th birthday. So, I first started experiencing and figuring out how to be a lighting designer and a mom 25 years ago today.
Right. Wow,
And the world has changed a lot in that time.
it
But
has.
what what happened is, I'm probably obviously really passionate about lighting and lighting design, and I loved doing the work. Um, But it's a demanding profession, and I found it really challenging to do lighting design and be the kind of mom that I wanted to be.
Hmm.
So I actually took a couple of off ramps. I worked as an educator for a while, and I worked as a lighting sales agent for a while because it was a little bit more flexible. I could work part time in that company. But I missed it. I missed design, and so I always say when my kids were old enough to make a sandwich and understand mom's on a deadline and they weren't going to starve if I didn't take care of them,
Right.
I started my firm. But that's where I think a lot of people stop. They do that out of necessity for themselves. And what happened for me is the first 2 or 3 employees that I had were other women who I watched them have a baby, 6 months, 2 years, whatever later, quit working.
Yes.
And I called them one at a time. Every time I saw it happen, I called and said, "Hey, I noticed you quit your lighting design job. Is that because you didn't want to do it anymore, or is that just because it didn't work with your life as a mom?" And so
Right.
instead of, keeping that to myself as the firm owner, it was really important for me to share that with my team members. And then so that became our thing. And it extends. It's not just moms. We're all whole people who have
Exactly.
a lot of other responsibilities, whether it's pets or parents or families, of all kinds. Um, and so that was I guess the germination of my advocacy. That's where that came from, was I just like wanted our profession to be more open and allow for that. And I've seen that now start to happen, partly because of Wild and, all of the women in lighting and lighting design started talking to each other and sharing best practices and figuring it out together. And so I have seen, there are a lot, there's, I haven't seen the numbers lately, but there are a lot of women-owned firms and women influencing lighting design as a profession. And I think that's a good thing because, um, our brains, we've had to multitask. I don't know. I mean, there's science here. I don't want to be super like gender-ish about it, but there is science about how women's brains work compared to men's, whether that's just because we've developed them that way or whatever. But
Yeah, there are
um,
differences for sure. And there is a thing called mom brain that is, I can attest to that.
you're experiencing that now.
I am.
Um, but it lends itself well to running a company where you have to be thinking about a lot of different things at once. And I think our industry, I still think we have a long way to go, but I think we've benefited from.
Absolutely. And you noticed, I know you took a look at our first piece on Francesca Bettridge, and she was really one of the pioneering women in design. So she was really an inspiration. And I think, also on the architecture side, a lot of the same things are happening. You see women just dropping out because it's too much, it's too demanding, and firms just don't really have that flexibility or understanding, or it's built on this model of you being there and staying as late as you possibly can, and you're looked down upon for leaving early. So I think it's wonderful to see someone in the profession that's looking at that in a different way and being a lot more supportive and open to people with families.
We don't have it totally figured out, and there are still times that people have to work late, but
Yes, still
it's
demanding for sure.
it's that coming in and supporting each other, because there are also times that people have to leave, and we
Right.
try to support each other and have things set up, have our projects set up with at least 2 people on them, so that there's always somebody else there who can come in and take over if you need it.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it. I love that. Well, I've officially reached the end of my questions, but I'm curious if there's any other recent projects that you would like to touch on at all. Not to put you on the spot, but if there's anything you've worked on recently that you would like to talk a little bit about besides your alma mater, which was a wonderful example.
Sure, yeah. This isn't super recent, but it's continuing to expand in St. Louis. There's The projects I get most excited about are projects that are really kind of built for people that are maybe justice based. So the one I'm thinking of specifically is called Pillars of the Valley, and it's an art installation, another small but meaningful project
Hmm.
that is memorializing a kind of a forgotten neighborhood in St. Louis that was a primarily Black neighborhood that was raised in the 1950s and 60s. And then it kind of got forgotten. And this artist who grew up around here, when he learned about it, he said, "Why did I not know about this?" And so he created this sculpture. We were able to light it. One of the things, important concepts that he wanted to convey is the life that had happened in that neighborhood. And so he wanted the lights to breathe. And so there's a sort of a dimming and um, coming on and off at the pace of human breath. And there's just a lot of
Wow.
um, really special features about that project that make it important because it's important to a group of people. I think I said at the beginning, it's the people that I get excited about. It's the clients that I enjoy working with. It's my team
Yeah.
members. And in this case, it is, okay, here's a whole group of people in St. Louis who were dispersed as children who still live in the city. And, this is a place that they can come and remember the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I would love to highlight that one, and we have a number of other
That sounds like a great one.
projects around, those kinds of concepts that are for people to either remember their ancestors or, those kinds of projects really excite me. So I'd love to
Yeah,
share.
it really has meaning to it and makes it feel like what you're doing matters, I think.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's not, you know, um, we work on casinos too, and that's a guilty pleasure. We get to put a lot of lights in and do a lot of flash and
Yeah.
but we also work on a lot of churches and
Mhm.
that's similar. Like this is a sacred place for people. Maybe that's it. That's what I really love is working on places that are sacred for people for whatever reason, whether it's because it's a park or because it's a church.
Yeah,
It's sacred and important, and then it makes it feel like what I'm doing matters.
that's true. And yeah, everybody defines sacred as something different. So it's interesting, I'm sure, to delve into each project individually and figure out what matters and what really makes people feel something when they're in the space.
Oh, can I tell a story?
Yes, absolutely.
This this is why lighting is so important. Let's see. It was several years ago, but we were just working with a manufacturer. They were just showing us a product and they were illustrating. It was a color changing, but it was a very tight beam, and they just wanted to show us how that tight beam could really light something far away. And
Yeah.
so they pointed it at a cross on the top of a church 2 blocks over, and we were oohing and awing. Oh wow, that's really cool. This
Yeah.
is all the things that I just said. Flashy, color changing, tight beam light. Um, and this woman came walking by, and she said, "I just want to tell you all that I've had a really hard week, and seeing that light up there
Mm.
at the top of that church just gave me hope."
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
oh, I mean that's why I do this. That's
Yeah,
what and we need to remember the power that we have, that we can,
that's true.
impact people with lighting. We
Really
can
can.
bring hope. So,
Yeah, like you said, lighting is one of the most visible things in a built environment, and you can really affect everything from somebody's mood to how they perceive the space to how they go about their day. So it's extremely important, and to be able to work on something so fulfilling that impacts somebody in such an emotional way is really a beautiful thing.
or even just a throwaway mock-up, be careful with your tools.
Exactly. Um, well, I thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you would like to add that perhaps that we didn't touch on that you think would be, like advice for people who are thinking about entering the lighting profession or something along those lines?
Let's see. I heard this recently from someone else, but really just show up and have fun.
Yeah. I think that's a good rule for any type of profession, for sure. You gotta
Yeah,
enjoy what you're doing, right?
absolutely. Yeah, it's so delightful talking to you. Thanks for
Oh,
letting me ramble on about
yeah,
my my
yeah,
experiences.
yeah, you had such great stories, and I can tell that you really love what you do. It really comes through in the way you talk about it, which is very inspiring to me. That's my favorite part of my job is getting to talk to people who are not only creating beautiful things, but enjoying doing it. So that's hugely
Thank you.
rewarding. I just wanted to thank you again before we close off, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy your time at the farm, and again, happy birthday to your son. I'm sure I'll be celebrating my son's 25th before I know it. So,
The days are long and the years are short,
yes,
and people
that
say
is
that
so
all the
true.
time, but it's so true. The
It
days are
is.
so long.
I know. I can't believe he's two already, so I can see it happening already. But
For sure.
anyway, thank you again. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much, Lisa. Take care.
Mhm.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.
This is Murray Bernard. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Subscribe for more conversations about lighting and explore Alcon lighting insights and language of lighting for deeper perspectives on design, technology, and the future of light.